If there were a dish that could instantly turn you back to the age of 18 after eating it, would you try it? In the depths of the market, there is a sushi bar that only serves one dish. The dish is called chilled fish lips. It's quite expensive, and it's only available for women. But once you eat it, you'll be returned to your youthful self overnight. My friend, who is 18, ate this dish and her face was glowing with health and happiness. "It seems Gary has been taking good care of you lately," I said, with a hint of jealousy. She lives like a grandmother, enjoying the comforts of home, and when her flowers wilt, she seeks out fresher ones outside. She'll never change her taste. Every time I mention her husband, she starts cursing. It's an open secret in our circle that Gary has cheated. For the sake of their kids and family, my friend has chosen to endure it in silence. However, recently, he's been unusually attentive, coming home early at night. I glanced at my phone as my husband texted that he was working late again. I calmly replied with a simple, "Okay." Browsing our chat history, the exchanges between us were nothing but updates and notifications. 7 years of marriage without a child. The wife he refers to is no longer the same, and neither am I. When I looked up, my friend had stopped in front of a small shop, her eyes revealing a bit of nervousness. Today, she wore a red knitted dress that made her skin look radiant. From a distance, she hardly looked different from a 20-year-old girl. No wonder Gary has been more restrained lately. "What I have now, you can have too," she said, pointing to the shop with a mischievous smile. The shop was very unassuming, lacking a proper sign, just a crooked wooden board that read, "Sushi bar." I'm not fond of fish, and before I even entered, the strong fishy smell made me hesitate. A middle-aged woman, slightly overweight and wearing an apron, sat inside with a disinterested look, not making any effort to welcome customers. "Once you eat the fish, good fortune will come your way," my friend insisted, pulling me inside. She leaned in and whispered, "Weren't you asking me how to win a man's heart? This is the secret." Just then, a woman in high heels and designer clothes stepped out, smiling. She was familiar with my friend, and both of them had the same enticing scent. For some reason, I suddenly felt a strong urge to try this dish. Inside the shop, there was only one woman running the place, the same one I had seen at the entrance. My friend skillfully pulled out a wad of cash and placed it on the counter, asking, "Can we have the fish?" She gestured toward me, and the woman behind the counter immediately nodded, taking the cash and sliding it into a greasy drawer before disappearing into a kitchen covered with thick black curtains. What kind of fish could cost this much? Just wait, it must be something special. My friend raised an eyebrow at me and then took out her phone to flirt with a guy she met the day before. She exuded a sensual charm from head to toe, drawing my gaze irresistibly. It felt as though everything remained unchanged, yet there was something captivating that made it hard to look away. Half an hour later, Linda brought out a plate of chilled fish lips, seasoned only with a splash of white vinegar to reduce the fishy odor, without any other spices. The plate was laden with dozens of fish lips, plump and pink, double the size of normal ones. Despite the pungent smell, it did little to whet my appetite. I couldn't help but ask, and my friend nodded confidently, picking up a pair of chopsticks and offering me a piece. "This is the essence." Bringing it closer, the fishy odor vanished, replaced by a familiar fragrance, the same scent as my friend and that stylish woman. "One night back to youth, and you won't worry about your man straying. I paid a pretty penny for this to help you with your crumbling marriage," she added. As I listened to her words and gazed at the fish lips on the plate, memories of my husband's distant demeanor flooded in. I suddenly took a chopstick full and popped it into my mouth. That evening, Ethan, who claimed to be working late, unexpectedly returned. As usual, I lay on the couch in my pajamas, scrolling through my phone. He walked in, saying he had forgotten some documents, but paused in the living room, noticing me. "Did you go for a makeover?" His Adam's apple bobbed as he drew closer. I was on the verge of forgetting how his eyes used to gaze at me so affectionately. "Wife," he said, a word I hadn't heard in a long time. I leaned in, wrapping my arms around his neck, and gently said, "No matter how busy you are, you need to spend time with me. After all, we're married." "Wife, you remind me of the excitement we felt when we first got out," Ethan said, pulling me in tightly, showering me with sweet words, unwilling to let me leave. In that moment, I felt the fish lips were the most delicious food in the world. Ethan had been seeing a fresh-out-of-college girl and often took her out with friends. Now, the person beside him was me. His friends were surprised but tacitly avoided mentioning the other girl. "You need to thank me," my friend boasted over the phone, her young admirer still sending her good morning texts. Our recent married life felt like a sweet honeymoon again, and I was utterly satisfied. "Did you secure a reservation for today?" I found myself craving the fish lips. That peculiar flavor was becoming addictive. Especially during our intimate moments at night, the images of those fish lips filled my mind, blended with Ethan's sweet whispers, making it hard to resist. "Don't worry, I made arrangements with Linda a long time ago." My friend had set a date before heading out with her young admirer. Now, she complained that Gary wasn't romantic enough or sweet-talking. She used to be called wooden and lacking charm, and her critique of him had shifted to reflect that. I glanced at Ethan, who was still asleep. Lately, he'd indulged a bit too much. His complexion looked pale, yet his lips curved into a vibrant smile. The market in the afternoon was still sparse, and I felt more at ease than the first time I visited. Linda remarked, "Every woman can't resist delicious food. The first time is fear, the second is fascination, and the third is complete surrender." By the time we arrived, Linda had prepared everything. Now, the fish lips were free of any fishy smell, and a mouth-watering aroma of meat wafted into the air, intoxicating me with its fragrance. Just as my friend and I were enjoying our meal, a sweet voice called out from outside. "Is the owner here? I'd like a serving of fish lips." The voice sounded surprisingly similar to the voice messages I had received from Ethan. I turned to see a girl in her early 20s standing outside the shop. She had a slender figure and tight skin, with innocent almond-shaped eyes, and she wore a limited-edition necklace around her neck. "Why aren't you eating?" my friend asked curiously. I subtly signaled her to look. The girl was chatting with Linda. She was Ethan's mistress, Jessica. She didn't recognize me since Ethan's social media updates were only visible for 3 days, and he rarely posted my pictures. I didn't have any photos of us together either, the only proof of my identity being the word spouse on our household registration. My friend wiped her mouth and cursed, ready to confront Jessica, but I stopped her. "Do you think she knows Ethan has a wife?" Watching Jessica's naive demeanor as she chatted with Linda piqued my curiosity. When Jessica sat next to us, my friend casually struck up a conversation. "Sister, you're so young and you're eating this kind of stuff? What a terrible man you must have." Jessica clearly didn't expect my friend to be so blunt, her cheeks flushed. "I've heard good things about this place, so I was curious." She shyly added, "Women who come here share similar fates." "Poor thing, I'm an experienced one. Maybe I can share some stunning secrets with you." Seeing this, my friend took a seat next to her, and I nodded, following suit. After some chatting, Jessica lowered her guard. "My boyfriend has been so busy lately, often ignoring our little home." Jessica pouted, looking forlorn. "I'm young and pretty, with a great figure. Why have I suddenly lost my appeal?" She lamented. "No matter how much I act cute or flirt, his reactions are always tepid. Then someone told me about this fish shop." My friend and I exchanged knowing glances, understanding that most men who are well-fed at home are no longer hungry outside. "Does this stuff really work?" Jessica gazed at the fish lips, unable to hide her disgust. "If you find it disgusting, then don't eat it," I advised her. My friend was aware of the power of the fish lips, and since Jessica was in a better position than I was, if she indulged, I would lose my appeal to Ethan. "Don't worry, once you eat it, you won't be disgusted anymore. You have to take risks for what you want. For your boyfriend, go for it." I encouraged her, grinning at my friend's shocked expression. After that, my life returned to its usual routine. Jessica and I added each other on WeChat. Jessica soon excitedly posted in our group. The miraculous effects of fish lips. Sisters, our relationship has warmed up. These fish lips truly have magical benefits. She claimed she could hardly live without them. My friend replied with a congratulatory message, then called me. Are you out of your mind? That's your husband. You're giving other women opportunities. Once she's had her fill of fish lips, you'll be out of the picture. Just then, my phone buzzed again. Ethan sent a message. Not coming home tonight. At the same time, Jessica's WeChat notification popped up in the group. You won't believe what she just said. My friend exclaimed in shock. In the group chat, Jessica's shy expression was followed by 2 messages. Sisters, she said she wants to marry me, and I've already agreed. I couldn't help but chuckle and immediately replied with, Congratulations, which sparked a furious reaction from my friend on the other end of the phone. Don't you think Gary smells even fishier now? Suddenly, the line went silent. After a long pause, she finally said, So you've noticed too. The last time I went to the sushi bar was at Linda's invitation. She told me the shop was closing and wanted to treat us loyal customers to a free meal. When I arrived, the door was locked, and Linda personally came out to greet me. On the table was a plate of fish lips that looked bland and unappetizing. I asked Linda why the shop was closing. She sighed, looking down, and said, I've been in business for so long, but no one wants to apprentice anymore. Once the shop is gone, it's gone for good. Her narrow eyes looked at me meaningfully as she added, Although the effects of fish lips are impressive, they're nothing compared to fish roe. She set down her chopsticks and smiled slightly at me. Just say what's on your mind. With a knowing glint in her eye, she turned and went back inside. A moment later, she returned with a bowl of yellowish, sticky liquid containing tiny, wriggling particles that smelled even worse than the fish lips. That girl must be the woman your husband is seeing on the side, I thought, looking at Jessica's posts filled with affectionate photos, realizing how attached Ethan was to her. 1 bowl of fish roe is worth 10 bowls of fish lips. If you eat this, your husband will definitely stop looking at that woman. I stared at the sticky, milky substance in Linda's hand, unable to suppress my frown. It was my first time seeing tiny particles wriggling in such a strange mixture. I bluntly asked Linda, Why are you helping me? With such powerful fish roe, why would you offer it to someone who has only been here 3 times? She smiled and said, Because I think you have potential. It would be a shame not to take you on as my apprentice. She pointed to a fading flyer for apprentices, her smile taking on a mysterious quality. I ate the fish roe, but when it came time to get intimate with Ethan, I rejected him. He was so caught up in passion that he nearly begged, but in the end, he stormed out in frustration, leaving behind the lingering smell of fish. In the mirror, I saw my skin glowing and smooth, full of vitality. In that moment, I could almost see my 20-year-old self in the reflection. Eating the fish roe transformed my perspective. It was no longer about pleasing a man, but rather enjoying my own beauty. But Ethan smelled so bad that even Jessica couldn't help but comment on his odor. Every time they met, he had to change clothes, yet he was completely oblivious to his stench. He indulged in a life of excess and desire, completely numb to the world around him. My allure over Ethan became increasingly obvious. He followed me like a puppy, showering me with flowers and gifts every day. He affectionately called out, "Wife!" eagerly inhaling my fragrance, completely unaware that I was only putting on a show of affection in front of others. Yet at crucial moments, I coldly rejected him as his blatant desire was off-putting. I felt nauseated by Ethan's persistent advances, while Jessica's life was filled with turmoil as they frequently argued. Every gloomy status update in my social media reflects my mood. Ethan's return home leaves me feeling lost. I once placed my hopes on the sushi bar, but now I find myself with nowhere to go. Unfortunately, when she went to the sushi bar, it was already empty. My friend called to ask if I felt a sense of emptiness with Ethan spending time away. I simply replied with disgust. "There's an awful smell at the table." From the security footage at home, I could also sense something was off with the sushi bar. Gary's odor was growing stronger, yet everyone else seemed oblivious. It felt like I was the only one bothered by Ethan's presence. Late at night, Jessica sent a message in the group chat. "Sisters, I've found something even better than sushi." She followed up with a photo of herself with Ethan, who was smiling while she leaned against him, looking quite cozy. Calculating the time, it had been half a month since Ethan had shown up after facing rejection from me. The next day, Jessica still hadn't received a reply from Ethan. Confused, she sent a question mark. My friend impatiently lashed out in a voice message. "Third party, what are you so pleased about?" The bombshell she had been holding in finally exploded. Jessica replied with a smiling emoji and playfully said, "Did you find out so quickly? Sisters, you've lost. She's already agreed to the divorce. You're welcome to my wedding." Her provocation sparked no anger in me. She was just a useless person, and if it made her happy, so be it. She smirked further, saying, "What's the point of holding on to a cheating man?" Her eyes brimmed with disdain. Watching Jessica's increasingly bold messages, I simply replied, "How does the fish roe taste? Is it similar to Ethan's scent?" There was a pause in the conversation, followed by a barrage of frantic calls from Jessica, which I ignored. I had no time for her. My friend's husband, Gary, had died. Specifically, he died in bed. The autopsy revealed that Gary had suffered a cerebral hemorrhage due to excessive indulgence, and the family had cremated the body overnight. Gary's mistress was going mad. While I was helping my friend handle the aftermath, I spotted that deranged woman. Supported by her family, she approached my friend, furious. "Your man is gone, but my daughter has lost her mind. Who knows what your man did to her? You all are responsible for my daughter's future." She was causing a scene, much to the amusement of the mourners. A 10-year-old child clutched her father's photo, crying loudly, creating a chaotic scene. Suddenly, the crazy woman started screaming, "Fish are fish! They're all fish!" Most people found it hard to comprehend, calling her insane, but I noticed my friend's expression changing and quickly signaled security to remove them. As they were leaving, the madwoman was being dragged out by security, her hands raised high, repeatedly shouting, "Fish." Her terrified gaze was fixated on Gary's photo. My friend handled everything with composure, as if this was just part of her job. Among the funeral expenses, there was one particularly high charge for sandalwood incense. Generally, sandalwood incense is only used for decomposed bodies or in extremely hot weather. However, at Gary's funeral, there was no body, just a box of ashes. Bodies that die violently are cremated overnight, but Gary's cause of death was due to a sudden illness, so it didn't fall under that category. Unless you know what I saw when I received the call that day. My friend claimed that Gary had indeed turned into a fish person. His fish body was covered in a sticky, fishy slime, and scales had spread all over him overnight. In the dark, murky substance, small bubbles emerged, and his features were somewhat recognizable as Gary's. I never expected even the fish ashes would be foul-smelling. Remembering that disgusting scene made me frown. Who wouldn't be frightened? Anyone waking up at night to see a monster beside them would go insane. That woman witnessed Gary transforming into a fish. "You don't seem sad at all," I asked her. She coldly replied, "What's there to be sad about? That kind of man deserved to die, didn't he? Then why did you go eat sushi to win him back?" I pressed on, following the direction of her finger to see a child being led by her grandmother, teary-eyed and looking around. Eating sushi was my last effort. If she turned back, we could live well together. But what if he goes looking for that woman the next day? Who's to blame for that? I said, "Two women can't have both fish and bear's paw, even a child understands this." My friend always knew this. She hoped sushi would restore her youth and revive her husband's fading heart. Too bad a dog never stops eating crab. I added, recalling the first woman who had eaten sushi and her connection with the fish shop. Remember, the sushi place has very strict requirements. The offering must be 100% loyal. If the offering strays, the sushi will slowly eat away at his vitality until he turns into a stinking fish. After she went looking for fun the next day, I had completely given up. Now, I just want to live well for myself. How long do you think it will take for Ethan to become a fish? I shook my head and replied,
I don't know.
At the same time, I and the others who had been involved with the sushi place were meeting Jessica for the first time. That woman only knows the benefits, she ignores the consequences. Now she's still searching for ways to rid Ethan of his fishy odor. At the funeral today, when Ethan walked in, I ran into him. He smelled even worse than Gary. A few days later, Ethan came home. After several days apart, he looked like a wooden stake, dazed and with hollow eyes.
What exactly did you drug me with?
He grasped my hand, questioning.
At Gary's funeral, I smelled an indescribably rotten stench.
He began to recall what others had been saying about the foul smells surrounding him. He couldn't smell his own odor, but he could catch a whiff of Gary's ashes. Lately, he had felt persistently thirsty, and he looked visibly emaciated, but when he went to the doctor, everything checked out fine. I recalled the whispers at Gary's funeral, where some claimed he had turned into a strange fish. Ethan couldn't shake the anxiety. Was he the next Gary? I consulted with a specialist, who said I had been cursed by a powerful custom, and he felt helpless. You're good friends with Gary's wife. You both want revenge on me, don't you? What did you make me eat?
Ethan, you're the one with a dirty mind. Stop blaming others. Didn't the doctor advise you to control your indulgences? Gary died in his mistress's bed.
He impatiently interrupted.
What can I eat?
The most he had consumed lately seemed to be the bitter essence of romantic affairs.
You've been spending all your time with Jessica. Why not ask her what she fed you? How do you know?
After a long silence, Ethan finally asked, and it was clear from my hint that he remembered something. He approached me, frustrated, saying,
You're going to be a dad.
I smiled and enlarged the chat window. My pregnancy report appeared on the screen, stating that Jessica was already a month pregnant, mocking me for being a
hen that doesn't lay eggs. How is that possible? How could she be pregnant?
Ethan's expression twisted in disbelief, his eyes reddening as he stared at his phone. From his demeanor, I saw no joy at the prospect of fatherhood. Instead, there was a mixture of shame and rage. I tried to comfort him.
Who do you think the child looks like?
With a loud crash, Ethan smashed a vase in the living room, fragments scattering everywhere. He stormed out, his face dark with anger. I calmly called a cleaning service to come handle the mess. After hanging up, my phone rang. It was Linda calling. I cleared my throat and forced a smile. Almost there, soon I would deliver a gesture of goodwill. Ethan's fury was no doubt because he knew that Jessica's child wasn't his. He had secretly gotten a vasectomy during our first year of marriage. That year, he held my hand and painstakingly persuaded me. Let's be child-free, honey. Life is short, and we should enjoy it. Kids will take away many opportunities to just be ourselves. We're both career-driven and don't want to give up work. Why not just live happily as dinks, dual income, no kids? Later, I understood that his every word was merely an excuse for his infidelity, seeking a carefree life while cutting off any unintended surprises. Years into our marriage, I occasionally felt maternal pangs, envious of peers who had children, but Ethan firmly opposed the idea. I had resorted to switching birth control pills and even sabotaging contraception. If I hadn't accidentally discovered his surgery records, I would have thought I was destined to remain childless. I hoped that the shame and fury of betrayal would be a lesson she would experience fully. Late at night, I received the news that Jessica was dead. The murder suspect, Ethan, was on the run. Jessica had been stabbed to death. The fingerprints on the dagger were undeniably Ethan's. Neighbors reported that as soon as he returned home, a fierce argument erupted, leading to violence. My friend consoled me over the phone, recalling that Ethan had reached out to me, crazed, asking,
What did you do to her?
I could only evade the question. His state was grim, completely different from Gary's before he died. Not only did he reek, but he also looked drained, as if all his vitality had been sucked away. My friend never expected Ethan to go so far as to kill Jessica. Her voice on the phone conveyed a sense of fear. Maybe this is the price for being entangled with two kinds of sushi. After all, how could he sleep with two women? I replied calmly. My eyes were fixed on the small glass fish tank I had just bought. Inside the palm-sized, round tank, a bright red fish swam happily. There was silence on the other end for a moment before she spoke again. I thought Ethan would just accelerate his transformation into a fish, but now it seems something is off. What else have you done to him besides the sushi? My friend intentionally lowered her voice, her tone heavy. She finally voiced the doubt that had been bothering her.
Since Jessica appeared, I felt like you've been unusually calm. I haven't done anything. Jessica is just reaping what she sowed. It has nothing to do with me. And who says she has to turn into a fish?
I had always been like bait, walking a treacherous path toward Ethan, carefully navigating to avoid spilling any water from the tank. The further I went, the more excited the fish in the tank became, wagging its tail as if eagerly anticipating what was to come. At that moment, the animal instincts for food were undeniably sensitive, excited, and joyful. It was fresh bait taking shape. This was a soon-to-be-demolished urban village, rarely frequented by people. The mingled stench of garbage and animal waste was overpowering, easily masking the fishy smell. For Ethan, this was undoubtedly an excellent hiding place. The fish stopped moving in front of a dilapidated house, opening and closing its mouth, blowing bubbles that swelled as if trying to leap out of the water, displaying a desperate craving for food. Surrounding the house were several stray cats, greedily sniffing at the scents wafting from within, lazily licking their paws. Under the watchful eyes of the cats, I gently pushed open the creaky wooden door.
Honey, I'm here.
The bait was not yet ready, and Ethan wasn't dead, clenching a wooden stick in his hand, his body covered with scratches from cat claws, suggesting he had been through a rough fight.
It's filthy here. Aren't you the one who loves cleanliness?
I knelt down to wipe the dust beneath him with a tissue. His hand, still gripping the stick, quivered slightly before finally coming to rest. He probably wanted to hit me, but he lacked the strength. Ignoring the disgust in his eyes, I took off my backpack.
Did Jessica tell you whose child it is? I heard her eyes were wide open when she died. You two were together every night. How could you doubt this child? If it were me, I wouldn't understand either. But I went to his grave to tell him the truth. I hope he can rest in peace.
I muttered to myself as I lined up the tools. At that moment, Ethan's gaze started to tremble, his wrinkled lips quivered repeatedly, and his face turned even paler than when I first entered. The moment I became Linda's apprentice, I learned to make bait, practicing with her for a long time. I was skilled with the tools, but when it came to actually using them, I was still uncertain.
What did he love most about you?
I fiddled with the knife in my hand, pointing the tip toward Ethan's groin.
Please, spare me!
Ethan weakly struggled and pleaded. Suddenly, I splashed water from the fish tank, and the bait leaped out. As it landed on Ethan's lips, the fish went wild, frantically sucking at something. Ethan's face contorted in pain, his limbs weakened, unable to make a sound. He watched helplessly as the fish absorbed his life force.
You see, the sushi can't wait!
I said, quietly anticipating the fish's final act.
I wonder if he had a moment like this when you killed Jessica? You really are ruthless.
No one answered me. Outside, cats began to howl, while inside lay only a withered bait corpse. By the time I finished cleaning up the bait, dawn was breaking. I wiped the sweat from my forehead and stuffed the last bit of bait into my pocket. The 2 bags in my hands felt heavy. The fish in the tank had bulging bellies, happily wagging their tails, ready for me to officially begin my apprenticeship. Linda should be pleased. I'd be able to submit my initiation task soon. Sushi is drawn to greedy and selfish bait. The more ruthless and thrill-seeking the bait, the more it seems to favor disloyal and immoral offerings. From the very beginning, Linda knew that my husband, Ethan, was the perfect choice. Choosing him over other options, you could say she voluntarily became the bait herself. After all, he wanted to sleep with 2 women. The fish roe acted as a catalyst, accelerating the transformation into bait. While Ethan circled around me again, Jessica had gone through great lengths to find Linda and seek fish roe. The roe couldn't be too abundant, but she hoped Ethan would become utterly devoted, lost in a haze of indulgence. Jessica gave all of her fish roe to Ethan, thus solidifying her role as bait. She foolishly thought she could bind Ethan to her with a child, but she had no idea that he was already sterilized. I knew I wouldn't misjudge someone,
You're truly perfect to be my apprentice.
Linda said, pulling a small handful of bait from the bag and placing it in my hand. From her slightly raised eyes, I saw both approval and despair. Being cold-blooded and ruthless was the best quality for running a sushi shop. Behind the kitchen lay the true secret, finally revealing a massive fish tank with dark water shadows covering the entire wall. Under the lights, schools of fish wriggled with their bright red tails, pink mouths gaping as they crowded the water surface, each one unique in shape and form.
Don't be deceived by how many fish there are. They can't eat much bait. Those 2 bags could last for many years.
Linda gestured for me to toss the bait into the water. I sprinkled it gently, and it was immediately devoured. Were you the one making the bait all along? Linda nodded and pointed to the empty feed bags nearby. Yes, my husband packed 3 bags himself. A year later, I moved the sushi shop to a more secluded alley. Here, I encountered many women unhappy in their marriages. They tried various ways to keep their men's hearts, but to no avail, ultimately choosing to come to my sushi shop. The bait was running low, and the fish were eager to be caught, which worried me. But today, a new customer arrived. While she was eating chilled fish lips, she suddenly covered her face and began to cry. I think I've found a solution,